Hello viewers, welcome to Offstream. So today we have got a very interesting guest with us. He's Ankur Naik. He's a retired squadron leader from the Indian Air Force. He's actually my course mate from National Defense Academy. Thereafter, he's also been a fighter pilot. He has flown MiG-21s and I think MiG-27s also, right?
Yeah, Su-30s and a little bit more.
Su-30s also, okay. So, but what is more interesting that apart from being a fighter pilot is that he was the ADC to the President of India. He was ADC to Honourable President Pratibha Patil. So basically ADC is what, like, we all have seen people from the Army, Navy and Air Force who are in their ceremonial uniform and who stand behind the President, Honourable President of India. So that is what an ADC is all about, the full form being aide-de-camp. I'm very lucky that Ankur is my coursemate. So that is how I could get him to our show and introduce him to our viewers. And that too in person, people can see what an ADC is all about. So let's hear it from Ankur. So hi Ankur, welcome to Offstream. So this is our new initiative, both from Bhaskar and us. So hello Ankur.
Welcome to the show, Ankur.
Thank you so much. And first of all, I wish both of you a very happy Friendship Day. And to Ranjul especially, 20 years we have come through. We are again together today. Bhaskar, you're my new friend from today onwards.
Yep. Happy Friendship Day. Yeah. So let's start this basically. So we just wanted to know ADC, hota kya hai? What is ADC is all about?
So I'll tell you an interesting concept behind what an ADC is all about. So what used to happen in yesteryears was that all the kings and the emperors and the heads of states, they used to rule a large area and large swaths of land and go around here and there, including their military generals. And the kings, of course, used to have a lot of wives and a lot of children, a lot of pretty daughters. So to find out who's the best groom for the daughter, they used to select the best gentlemen from other royal states who used to be the best in their ability, military ability, technical ability, strategy, planning for the wars, administration and everything. And of course, they have to be good looking and tall and handsome and all those things. And they used to select them as their ADCs to be their prospective grooms.
Oh.
So that was the concept when royalty used to be there. And even now most of the kings and the queens of the world have their ADCs with them. As times passed, all the general officers and the senior officers in war used to have an aide-de-camp. Now, aide-de-camp is a French word which literally means staff officer to senior officer. So when these generals used to travel on their horsebacks all around the world or to wayward areas where wars used to happen, the youngster officer who used to be outstanding in his ability in that particular camp used to be attached as an ADC to the general officer to take care of him while he's there, to take him around because he's supposed to be the best officer who would show him around and brief him about all the war related activities and take care of him while he is there. When these generals used to have even bigger territory to command, they used to have a regular ADC for them who was attached during those times for 1.5 years or 2 years or so as to be with him, learn the nuisances of the trade. And since he was an outstanding officer at his age and time, they used to groom him to be a senior officer and would expose him to whatever he would be seeing in future. So that is how this ADC concept used to work. So even now it is the same thing. All the supreme commanders in different democracies or royalties or autocracies, and in our times being the President of India, have their ADCs. So now it's more of a ceremonial role, but we do play a lot of part in the day-to-day activities of the President. So in India, basically, we have 5 AD camps, 3 from the Army, because Army is the biggest organization, defense organization, 1 from the Navy and 1 from the Air Force. And all senior general officers or air marshals or admirals have their own staff officers. They also get selected in their in different processes and get selected and come and join.
So this is for the president. So since the president is the supreme commander of the armed forces, so he has all the ADCs from the forces itself. So we also have ADCs just for our viewers. For all the governors also, I think there is, for them it is one from the armed forces and one from the central paramilitary forces, right?
Yes, so generally that is the rule. However, for states like Jammu Kashmir and some northeastern states, both the ADCs are from the military, because administratively the governor has to look after more to the state militarily than police wise. So it is dependent on what he wants. Most of the union territories have the police ADCs and not a defense ADC.
So basically now the president has got 5 ADCs, 3 from the army, 1 from the navy, 1 from the air force. Governor has 2 ADCs each. So basically
Yes.
1 from the army, or the other one can be from the central paramilitary forces, or both can be from the defense forces basically.
Yeah.
You are the ADC of Honourable President Pratibha Patil ji, and also someone else.
And Dr. Kalam.
Dr. Kalam also. Oh, that's great. That's really great. So before we go to your experiences, तुम्हारा जो experience है, so ये इसका process क्या है? How do you get selected? So it has been really intriguing for us, me also actually.
Yeah. So what happens? I will tell you what happens in the Air Force, since I was an Air Force officer. What happens is you have to be outstanding in your flying, in your ground subjects, in your, as we call it, annual confidential reports. You have to have a minimum height of 176 centimeter. You have to be brilliant in drill. You have to be somewhat good looking, and you have to be aware of what is happening around the world. General IQ and EQ should be high. Once that happens, of course, you're not aware of your ACRs, but then you get selected from your respective commands. Then you go to your commander-in-chief of that particular command for an interview. If you get selected there, then you go to the respective air headquarters, Army or Navy headquarters. You have few interviews, few written tests and all that. Then the chief of your particular service selects you. He selects basically 3 out of the entire Air Force. 3 of us go to the president's house. We have some drill tests, some interviews with military and the civil staff, because president house is a mix of civil and military. And in the end, the president has an interview with you, and if he loves you, you get selected. So in all, we have around 13 interviews and around 3-4 written tests. That's all.
Wow, that's a long process.
I was the ADC from 2006 to 2010. 1 year I served with Dr. Kalam, and 2.5 years with Mrs. Pratibha Patil. Towards the end of my tenure, yeah, I was the Deputy Military Secretary to the President.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah, no, so tenure is around 3 years. But I got an extension because the Deputy Military Secretary was leaving and there was nobody selected. So I, being the senior most ADC, so what happened in my tenure? My tenure was, towards the end of the tenure, the Deputy Military Secretary had to leave, and the new one was not selected, and I was the senior most. So I got sidestepped at the Deputy Military Secretary, and the new Air Force ADC joined.
So, but you have given all the criteria. लेकिन एक सबसे interesting fact है कि you cannot be married, right? You have to be a bachelor.
Yeah. So again, there's an interesting concept. If you are married, you cannot be an ADC to a king, because he has to marry your daughter, marry his daughter to you, right?
That was in the past.
No, so the rule remains. In fact, a lot of ADCs have gotten married to the governor generals or the president's family. That is the truth. But that apart, the actual reason is basically it's a 24-hour job. And if you are married, you cannot take care of your better half. There are some security concerns. We live inside the president's house itself, and it being a secure zone, there are rules and regulations for that particular.
And is there a age criteria?
Yeah, I think it's 23 to 26 years. So generally, it falls in the bracket of 4 to 6 years of your physical service in the forces.
So does that mean you go wherever the president goes?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
How many countries did you go to with the president?
Madam, I think around 16, 17 or so.
How about with Kalam sir?
Yeah, with him I went to 4.
How does it feel to work there in the topmost office of India? Basically, the ADC stays. Your residence is at the Rashtrapati Bhavan itself, right?
Yeah. So our residence is just below the president's residence. We stay just below. We're on the ground floor. The president is on the first floor. Yeah. So what happens is once you go to a place like Rashtrapati Bhavan, of course you are overawed. It's a very big structure, 340 rooms, 300 plus acres of area. And at that age and span, when you are maybe 24, 25, when you are fresh from your own units or squadrons or ships, it's basically a very different atmosphere. And you're actually coming out of a cocoon with hardly any wings, and you're supposed to be a jet aircraft there. It's something like this. So of course it's a very big awe-inspiring structure and awe-inspiring activity which happens there. And of course, President is the supreme commander of the forces. At that age and span, I hardly think anybody must have met the chief of the Army, Navy, or Air Staff. And you certainly go up those 13 interviews and you meet all of them. And when you realize what are you up to, there is of course a lot of anxiety and a feeling of secluded from the outside world as to what is going to happen there. But of course, since you are there, you get used to the daily process and the rigors, and you. So the key thing is the incumbent ADC to whom you are replacing, he becomes your overstudy. So you basically shadow him everywhere, and you see what are the nuances of the job. And the key point is they test you for 14 days. If you are not found fit enough, you're sent back. And this has happened in the history also. So it is not that just because you're selected and you're good and everything, if you don't fit in the system, you just go back. No shame in that. A lot of people have gone back, but basically Rashtrapati Bhavan is the highest office of the country. It works on a zero error syndrome. There is no leeway for any error at any point of time. Everything works round the clock to the second. Every system works to the second and to the best of its ability and capability. So the point here is you cannot be unprepared or lackadaisical or lazy about anything you do. From morning 6 till night, maybe 12 or 1. So that is how it works there. So daily routine may be different every day because there are a lot of ceremonies happening. You must be seeing all those award ceremonies, some heads of states coming in. We move out in the country to different states to do different functions. We move out of the country to do different states, visits and functions. Each of them have their own importance. So at 11 o'clock, I may be meeting all the best cardiologists of the world. At 12 o'clock, I may be going to some political function. At 1 o'clock, I may be going to the parliament. At 2 o'clock, I may be flying off to, let's say, the Northeast, where in the summers, wherein on the aircraft, I will change my uniform to a winter uniform, land there, do a ceremonial function. From there, maybe going to Andamans, change uniform again because it's summers there, and come back to Delhi in the night at 3 o'clock or so. So this is a general routine there, and it works 7 days, 365 days a year.
So apart from the tedious schedule, what was the most challenging thing that you faced while serving the president?
So as I say, it's basically a zero error syndrome. You cannot be found wanting about any knowledge about that particular function or that activity happening around. So if you today ask me what is happening in Olympics, I should be able to rattle out the figures of the medals. I mean, it is something like that. Or maybe able to tell the history of Olympics. Why was Olympics even there? And what is going to happen in the future? So, so it is something like that. I mean, if you are going there, and if the president desires, or if it's a function of a president's standard, then you cannot be found wanting about anything. You should know the history, the present, and the future of that particular activity.
You cannot say, I'll come back to you.
Oh, no way. No way.
Okay. So, but one more thing, like how many ADCs do they accompany the president in one day? Like, are the others off?
So what happens is we have a schedule. So every day there are 2 ADCs specifically for the president who work round the clock, 24 hours.
Okay.
One is like a shadow, the other one is assisting him in doing his work. So the number 3 or number 4 is with the spouse of the president in case he or she has his own engagement. The number 4 and number 5 are working for future functions. So 3 days in advance, we go to the place where the function is supposed to happen. We brief everybody, check a lot of other activities. In case required, we also travel to other states to check whether the function is of president standard, if there is something wrong, protocol issues, security issues, administration, people who are supposed to be there, are they there or not? do they fit into the space of things or not? So it's a 24-hour job. So one day you will be with the president, second day you must be doing something else. That is why it's a continuous routine. So we hardly, maybe all 5 of us getting together is a rare phenomenon. Only maybe in functions. Only maybe in functions we get together.
No, one thing I was going to ask, after serving the president for so many years in such a tight schedule, do you feel like going back to the defense force, or does it happen that this ADC, they go back to the army, or do they go elsewhere?
Yes. So what I did was, I will tell you my experience. I did all my courses, mandatory service courses, while I was in the Rashtrapati Bhavan. I did not take leave, but I went for my flying. I kept my flying currency on, and I did all the courses. It is, I would say, a toss of the coin, or rather fate of luck, that I decided to quit from there and join the civil life. But almost everybody goes back to their respective arms and continue to serve there.
Okay, almost everybody goes back. Okay.
They are at the top, right? So are you being monitored all the time, or your family is being monitored, or any background checks and all that? And are you allowed to come out just to Delhi to go to the Khan market, or maybe Oscars?
Now or then?
No. I'm talking when you were there. Like what?
Yeah, then.
Yeah, of course.
Huh?
Of course. Everything is checked from head to toe. Friends, families, friends, movements, everything is checked. There is no way you will be near the president without everybody knowing everything about you.
Okay.
Oh, pretty tough.
Yeah. If you would have visited me in Rashtrapati Bhavan, you would have been surely checked thoroughly as well.
Okay. No, what about you? Do you come out like for a role at Khan market?
Yeah. That is not a problem. You can go out provided you get time.
So do you have to plan in advance, or you can just come out, or that is up to you how you manage it?
So of course, what happens is there is no way that the president can be left behind without an ADC. So in all, 3 would be there 24 hours for sure. 2 of us, if we can manage, if there is no function and we know in advance there is no function, we inform them and we go out. If there's an emergency, of course, you have to be in the radius of return so that you can head back very quickly.
Finally, so you left after 4 years, like total around 4 years, 3.5 ADC to the president, and around 6 months of the deputy.
Deputy Military Secretary. Yeah.
Okay, Deputy Military Secretary, Deputy MS. Okay. So, what is about getting married at Rashtrapati Bhavan? What is it about?
So what happened was, since I was relinquishing my ADC tenure, and of course my better half was working in Dubai, and we thought of getting together quickly, since I was planning to go back to the Air Force and all those things, and she was planning to come back. So I had to take special permission of the president herself to get married.
Okay.
So I was lucky enough to get married then.
Is this a norm that you can get married there?
No. It's an exceptional activity, only with the blessings of the president.
Oh.
It has to be.
Yeah.
That's amazing. No, so what do you do now after that?
Okay, interesting.
I would like to know. Yeah.
So I'm into many things. The sky remains my first love. So I'm into aviation. We do air charters around the world. We do cargo aircrafts, passenger aircrafts, small helicopters, hot air balloons, kites, everything. Whatever flies, we will be able to give it to you. So luckily or unluckily, because of Corona, the business has been good. The passenger side is down, but the cargo aircrafts are moving around. We moved the United States aids into India recently, 15 days back. That was my aircraft which did that. We're doing a lot of other stuff. We're planning to do some Guinness Book World Record in Nepal, wherein it will be the highest ramp walking happening at the base camp of Nepal, using some helicopters to go there and all that. Some royalty of Italy and all are planning to join there. That is something I do. Other than that, I am, of course, a lot of green activity. I am into biomass. It's all philanthropy basically, But I do biomass, I do river rejuvenation by bioremediation, I do energy plantation, and other than that, because it's a digital age, I am into e-learning and online psychometric assessment. Something what is my passion is I am digitally restoring Ajanta caves for Ranjul and Bhaskar's kids to see. Otherwise, they'll all fall down. I'm also finishing my law this month. I'll finish my law, and I'm also a territorial army officer. So I go sometimes and do that job as well. Wear my uniform again and do some firing and come back.
How do you manage all this, man?
So you after leaving, you were with you joined a corporate, right? Immediately after
Yes.
you were with Leela Group, right? No?
Yes.
Okay. You worked with them for some few years, and thereafter. Okay. So
But it is not only.
What is biomass actually?
So biomass is anything which grows on the tree, below the tree is all biomass. Okay. Plant, tree, shrub, grass, everything is biomass.
Okay.
Even water hyacinth and whatever grows in water also is biomass.
Okay.
So what we basically look after is agri residue. Okay. Basically, that is what is controlled cultivation by mankind. So we look after that, because rest all is nature control. Nature controls everything very nicely. If it is more, nature puts on fire or floods or droughts required to control the equilibrium of earth. What happens is biomass is, since all this gets burnt in northern part of India, Haryana and Punjab, the entire and westerlies are blowing. So you have all this pollution coming to Delhi and Haryana and also Spain. It becomes black. But the fun part is, yes. But the fun part is, it does not only happen into India, it happens around the world. Everywhere in the world, people burn their leftover crop and agri residue. Okay. It is a cause of major global warming and all that. India gets the highlights because, of course, we love to give lashes to our own country. Yep. Singapore goes black, China goes black because of Philippines and Vietnam and Indonesia burning their rice crops. Basically, it all goes back. Everywhere it goes back. But we took a mission as to understand why it happens and how can we mitigate this particular activity. So why does a poor farmer burn it? One, he doesn't have the wherewithal and the resources to do it himself. He has to rely on the labor. 3, even if he collects that biomass, where will he keep it? It does not have the storage facility. 4, it being initially inherently methane producing, it can catch fire because basically heats up and moisture, and also it can catch fire. 4thly, it is of no use to him unless if there is a physical material value to this. So what we do is we create village level entrepreneurs. Now, once the harvesting is over, a farmer has to wait for a particular period of time for that soil to get back its fertility, vagera, and all that before he gets into the next season of the crop. What will he do till then? He has no source of income. His harvested activity is finished. He is yet to go to the mandi to sell it across and what to do. So what we do is we microfinance him, we teach him, we train him, we give him the resources, including tractors, harvesters, balers, and everything. We create a village level entrepreneur in the radius of around 50 kilometers. They teach everybody around them. They collect all the biomass, put it in a tractor and a trolley, get it to our local centers, storage centers, which are of course leased by us. Based on the moisture value, they are immediately paid off in a digital way, which is again a digital revolution kind of thing. The farmer is paid off. For every acre of biomass waste, agri waste which comes to us, he benefits depending on the kind of biomass, whether it is rice, parali, wheat husk, or soya waste, or cotton waste, or whatever it is, around 1,000 to 3,000 rupees per ton, which is a huge thing for him, because it's an extra value of so-called, if I can say, kachra or garbage for him.
Waste.
Waste for him. When it comes to our collection centers, depending on the offtake, whether what industry is using and what they want, we either convert them into briquettes or small pellets. Now, pellets, of course, being small size and depending on whatever diameter they want it, is easily transportable. Briquettes are not transportable, so they're immediately used or off depending on where the offtake is. Again, depending on the industry which is using them, if they want it to be converted into steam, we install the boilers, we burn the biomass in a controlled way wherein nothing escapes into the atmosphere. The energy efficiency vis-a-vis a non-renewable fuel is 15%. So it is more efficient than any coal anywhere in the world, which has been documented, researched, and put into the government system. And we either give them energy or electricity or steam. These are the basic things for which basically coal is burned in India for all steel industries, FMCG, cement industries, all these places. So this is how we are now going ahead. In fact, you will be glad to know that Shell Global has invested into us. They have a technology wherein biomass will be directly converted into diesel to be put into our cars and even aviation gasoline. Mitsui Japan is investing into us on 4th of August. It will be a global announcement. Again, they are also looking at mitigating residue, agri-residue, and converting into energy. This is what is happening around the country. We are present in around 19 states already, doing phenomenal activity. The company has won all the awards possible into sustainable energy and blah blah blah. Very interesting because the government has given 5,500 crores for bamboo fund. So now bamboo is a grass, all of us know. It grows every season and every year. If not cut or not used by our industry, it is basically a waste. So as I said, everything that grows on trees is biomass. We are looking at Northeast to actively use this energy form to reduce its dependency on fossil fuel like coal and petrol and diesel and do this. So we will be there very soon. Already opened doors with a lot of other states. So this is in a nutshell what we do.
That's really nice.
Awesome.
And it is a totally like off track. Like we were trying to talk to you on a totally different topic. Now, actually, this is becoming even more interesting. Actually,
so basically, the Prime Minister wants that the farmer becomes. There is a clarion call to say Annadata to say Urja Data. Okay. So he gives us food, but now he's giving us energy also, and it's a value addition to the entire rural economy cycle, wherein the farmer, where poor farmer of small land holdings actually have to go and do majduri under the Manrega schemes or other schemes to earn the daily wage laborers. This is an extra income for them anyhow. And a lot of cooperatives are doing it around the country. So much so that a small landholder, now I have examples I will show you around. He's become big landholder, has bought 2 tractors and 3 vehicles and doing fantastically well. So much so that there are now requirements for this to be exported out of the country. For example, Japan burns logs for its energy. Logs, not biomass. So Japan is looking at us. Brazil is a ethanol economy since 1970s. Brazil is looking at us for this model, which is now very economical. So the key point is basically this kachra is available everywhere. People tell us, kya hai? Kachra to hai. But the point is, who will pick it up? Who will store it? Who will convert it? What are the logistic costs? Diesel costs change everywhere. Why will you do it? What is the economical value? So we have brought that entire ecosystem into a cycle and creating an economical model, which is also controlling a lot of livelihoods around the country.
So you are going to set up that plant in Assam?
Yes.
And what will be the capacity of that plant?
So it depends what the company wants. This plant is going to be 15 megawatt.
So then bamboo cultivation can be done in a big way in Northeast in that case.
Actually, cultivation is not required. The biomass is already available. So to give an example, there is 500, which has been mapped, is 500 million metric tons of agri waste. I'm not talking of entire biomass. Agri waste is available in India. And you will be amazed to know we only use 5 million.
Oh.
We have everything. If you just want us to do biomass assessment, we will come to a place, do a biomass assessment of 50 to 60 kilometers. If you want us to give you biomass in its raw form, we can give you. If you want it to be in pelletized form, we'll give you in pelletized form. If you say, no, we will do the boiler, you just give us biomass, we will do that. If you say, no, set up the boiler for us and operate it also for us, we will do that for you. You would say, no, give us steam, we'll give you steam at a particular value. If you would say, no, you set up the plant, you give electricity, we will buy electricity, we can do that also.
That's really
Well, Ranjula, let us think. How can we collaborate with him
yeah,
to set up a
I
business?
will speak to him in a different level now. Haven't spoken to him on these lines anyways, so we can also
Interesting.
but anyway, he's coming to Northeast, so we can also talk then, or maybe when I come to Delhi soon.
Yep.
See, like one more, like one of my friend. So there was this guy. His company's name is GPS Renewables. Like they are sort of tied up with a lot of hotels, with also basically like the Infosys and the Tata campuses and all that. So what they do basically is that any food waste or any kind of renewable, non-renewable waste kind of things, and they collect. For example, they have got a huge contract with the GMC, like the Guwahati Municipal Corporation, and what they do, they get the entire waste collected at a place, and again they have got the setup, and they either can produce either I think electricity at certain level, or maybe the cooking gas basically. Waste is to basically to getting urja, or say like electricity.
The idea behind it is also something called decentralized power generation.
Okay.
A lot of places, let's say Northeast, will not have. Now we have all those power lines going and all those things, but still, let's say the power fails. You have to have decentralized power stations which are off grid, which can sustain among themselves. Biomass is round the clock. You can even put grass into it for it to burn up and provided to give it at a particular moisture value to generate electricity and energy for you. The other challenge which now we'll face in the future, because we are not yet energy sufficient, or we are energy deficient. So the future would be to store that energy into something. So now the activity is going into gel batteries, not chemical batteries, which are biodegradable. In fact, there are two girls from Orissa who have created the first battery which is out of bio waste. They're trying to patent it and have come to us. There is another guy in Roorkee who is creating enzymes out of bio waste, which are actually used in paints and other activity. So it's a huge market of even substitutes of what comes out of biomass. And it's all free. Actually, if you look at it, it's all free. You set up one plant and a lot of derivatives out of it will give you a lot of value chain into people who are willing to buy stuff out of it. That catalyst is now used into cloth industry, wherein it is used to cut the cloth into a particular shape and size and all that.
In fact, like we had, like he was talking of bamboo cultivation and all. There was a huge election issue also, where two of the bamboo mills have been shut down because of economic reasons and all that. They couldn't be profitable and all. But of course, this can be another alternate way to set up few things. What do you say, Bhaskar?
Yeah, definitely.
Yes.
I have a question, Ankur. So suppose I need 300 kilowatt, and how much waste do I need to generate that?
So as a ballpark figure, a 3 acre of agri-waste creates 1 megawatt.
3 acre, okay. Then we can produce lots of energy.
Yeah, but a small plant will actually take more capex. So it makes sense where you actually use it on an industrial use, where you know that the plant has to run 365 days a year. They need energy. Rather than as a power grid station, which is basically into a PPP partnership, which happens with state governments.
I'm asking because the tea factories on an average need that kind of power, and it runs for 220 days in a year. And so we need that energy all the time. So if we can figure out the waste.
We can maybe I will connect you with my fellow who does this biomass assessment and all those things. We can talk. If there's a small setup which can happen in a place, we're more than happy to do it. Maybe you can even, if there is a sufficient electricity production, you can even outsource this to people at a very cheap cost. You can give it to the village as a CSR activity. A lot of guys are doing it actually that way. It's an employment generation for them as well. They have to collect biomass and put it into sacks or whatever tractors to get it to them. It's again a circular economy wherein everybody benefits actually. If you put biomass, you get free electricity, something like that. You can local village level, you can do that.
What is the name of the company here, Ankur?
PRESPL, PRESPL.
PRESPL, PRESPL. Okay. And I'm sure like Bhaskar is getting a little more intrigued now and more interested now. And really nice here, and I'm also really glad to get you to our forum. It has been our honor actually to bring
It's an honor, seriously,
to our audience, someone like, and been there at the highest office of India. Right there, as you said, his residence was right below the residence of the Honourable President of India. I'm sure our viewers will be, like thrilled to have you here and to listen to you and to see someone in person who has been or who held that position of ADC to the President of India. Thanks a lot, Ankur. Thanks a lot for joining us and giving us your valuable time.
Thank you for having me here, and I wish all of you the very best of health and happiness. I hope all your families are vaccinated and they're all well. And if I can be of any help to anybody out of this audience for any of the activities I do, please feel free to reach me anytime. And thank you, Bhaskar. You're my friend now. And Ranjul, keep in touch.
Thanks, Ankur.
Inshallah, we'll catch up soon whenever you're in Delhi or I'm there in Guwahati.
Yeah. Sure. We'll have to catch up soon, and really happy Friendship Day. And if you really liked it, and if you want similar contents in future, I want to take this opportunity to tell you to like this channel and subscribe to it, so that we can get more and more interesting and this kind of smart content to you people. Thanks a lot, Ankur.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming.